In this episode of Axe Tuts, we take a look at the secondary dominant chord and the harmonic minor scale. Hello and welcome to Axe Tuts, the show where I play guitar and talk about it, but usually in the opposite order. I'm your host, Ray George. This is the second video covering the theory needed to play over the jazz blues progression that I introduced 2 weeks ago in episode 18. I won't be covering how it applies in this video, but I'll go over the theory. But don't worry, there's also an example to try out. Probably next week we'll put it all together over the jazz blues. So as you know if you've been following my videos, the 5 chord in a major key is the dominant 7th and harmonically resolves very well to the 1 chord. A secondary dominant is a harmonic tool, if you like, in which a dominant 7th chord is used functioning as a 5 chord to a chord which is not the tonic of the key in which you're playing. You can find 5 secondary dominant chords within any major key. This is because there are 2 rules that secondary dominants need to follow. The first is the root of the secondary dominant has to be diatonic to the key. And the second is it has to resolve up a 4th or down a 5th to a chord that is diatonic to the key. Using these rules, you will find 5 secondary dominants in each major key, plus the primary dominant, the 5 chord of the key. When referring to dominant chords functioning as the secondary dominant, they are referred to as the 5-7 of the diatonic key that they would resolve to, although they do not need to necessarily resolve to that chord within the progression. Secondary dominants are used to create harmonic movement within a progression and can be found in the jazz blues progression that I covered 2 weeks ago as the 5-7 of 2. These chords do not technically belong to the original key, since they are not diatonic, therefore we can't use the same scales based on the key to solo over them. When playing a secondary dominant, we say that we are in a temporary key. If the chord is the dominant of another major key, we can temporarily use the scales from that key over the dominant chord. For instance, if we're in C major and we use the 2-7 of 4, we would temporarily be in F major, and over the C7 we could use C mixolydian for instance. But if we are in a minor key, however, you cannot simply use the natural minor scale, since the natural minor scale does not contain a dominant 5 chord. This is where the harmonic minor scale comes in. The intervallic definition of the harmonic minor scale is tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, minor third, semitone. And if we harmonise the scale, you'll find that the 5 chord is in fact a dominant 7th. Therefore, if you're playing over a secondary dominant chord which resolves to a minor chord, we can use the harmonic scale based on the root of that minor chord. For instance, in the chord progression that I'll be using later on, it's in the key of G major, with the second chord of the progression being B dominant 7th, functioning as the 5-7 of 6, which is E minor, so we can use the E harmonic minor scale over the B7 chord. So before we jump into today's example, we do of course need to learn the harmonic minor scale fingerings. Remember to practice them just as you would any other scale. I've gone over several different scales in these videos, and they should all be practiced up and down the fretboard, both ascending and descending the scale. Use sequences and play them over the cycle of fourths. You might also want to link them together so that you can play them laterally on the guitar neck as well as horizontally, like I did in the major scale linking video. Okay, so here they are. To finish, I've made an example that you can listen to, watch, and try out for yourself if you like. The chords are G major, B7, which is the secondary dominant as I said before, it's the 5-7 of 6, and we'll be playing E minor harmonic over it. The next chord is C major, and the last chord is D7, which brings us back to the beginning of the progression. Apart from the new harmonic minor scale, I guess I'm using a similar approach to playing over the progression that I used in last week's video on the modes, so in this case taking from the parent scale of G major. And that's it for this episode. I hope that it made sense and you can apply it to your own playing. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. As always, if you have any questions, queries, comments or suggestions, you can leave them in the YouTube comments section or on twitter.com/RayGeorge. And you can also listen to some of the tracks and even catch previews of what's to come on my SoundCloud account, which is soundcloud.com/RayGeorge.